And now let's spawn our animal on the grid. So this animal is not clickable, but when I refresh our page, we spawn this animal on a random cell on our grid. So let's think how to put our animal on the grid. From the first view, it seems that this object has only the emoji of the chick, but actually it also contains the data about the clicking reward, the current level of the animal, and maybe other properties like name, because you may want to show these details on the page. We have one data structure objects that can contain many properties inside of it. So let's create an example pet, which will be an object. So for example, our pet might look like this. So we have an object with the key emoji and with the value of this emoji, and also other properties like name, which is equal to chick. So this is good, but we want to have multiple pets during our game. So in our final version, we can merge the same pets to get a new pet of the next level. And this pet will have other properties as well as other emoji and name. And for that, we can store pets inside of the array. Let's call our variable pets. Now I can expand it. And now inside of this array, we can add other animals. I added 10 animals and their levels from 1 to 10. The first one is chick, and if we merge two chicks, we get a bunny, and so on until we get the unicorn. This will be our source of truth, and this will be our constants. So capital letters represent constants. And then if you want to add some properties or change our emojis, you can change them inside of this const pets, and it will affect an entire game. So now let's return to our version, and as you see, we have an empty board. So let's create a function for spawning our animals. For that, I will add a new section core actions right after our HTML elements. So inside of this section, we will write all the functions that represent the main logic of our game. So let's create a function spawn new pet. So this function should spawn the first level of animal. So for that, we need to access the first object inside of the constant pets. I can access the first object with the index of 0, and this will create a new variable pet, which is equal to this object. One thing that you need to remember about this variable is not a copy of the object from our pets. This variable is just a link to the same object. It means that if we do any changes on this object, it will also affect the objects inside of the constant pets. If you don't understand why it works in this way, this is just because objects are reference value data types, and I have a short video about it. But let's return back. So what we need to do with this variable pet, we want to put it on our board. So our board is an array of 16 values, which currently are nulls. So we can access the board by index, and then we can put our object pet inside of this index. So this code will put our pet object into the first position on our board. Currently, if you save this file, nothing will happen, and this is because of two reasons. The first, you haven't called this function yet. The second, you don't have any representation of our object inside of our HTML. So to show our animal on our board, we need to create a new div with this animal. So to better understand how it works, let's go to our index.html, and here inside of the grid div, let's create a new pet. So at first we need to create our cell. For that, I create a new div, and then I add the class for this div, which is cell. So now if I save this file, you will see that we have one additional cell on this board. Actually, we generated the first cell, and then more 16 cells have been generated due to our JavaScript code. Then you need to understand that the picture of our chick is just an emoji. So it means that we can copy this emoji, and then if you create a new tab in your browser, you will see that you can paste this emoji here. So it works as a common text. So let's close this tab and return back to our HTML file, and here inside of the div cell, let's add our emoji chick. And now if I save this file, you see that a small emoji of our chick is displayed on our page. So this is fine if you want to show only chick. In the final version of this game, you see that we don't have only our emoji, but we also have the level of this pet, the name, and the value how much you earn per click. If you want to display multiple objects on one cell, and if you want to have the full control over them, it means that putting your emoji as the part of the cell will not be enough. You need to create a new div inside of the div cell. So let's remove our emoji, and then let's create a new div. So this div will have the class of pet, And now let's paste our emoji inside of this class. So this div creates a new animal on our page. And you see that the styles of this div is different from the styles of our cell. This is because this div has the class pet, and this class pet contains other styles inside of our style.css file. So this is what we need to generate with our JavaScript. In the first layer, we'll create our grid with cells. And on top of it, we'll create a new layer with our animals. I will delete this code later, but now let's go to our JavaScript file. So our purpose is to create the same div on our page. We have the function render that is responsible for showing all the objects on our board. So inside of this function, let's create a new variable cell data. So this variable can be equal to null because initially our board is filled with nulls, or it can be equal to our pet object. Then we have the code that generates cells, so let's separate them. For that, I add a new comment that this block is responsible for cells, and then let's create a new block that is responsible for pets. Our cell data can be equal to null or our object. Here I check that our cell data is not equal to null, so it means that our cell data is equal to our object. And now, if this is a pet object, let's create a new div that will represent the pet. At first, let's return back inside of our HTML file, and here you see everything what we need to generate. So we need to create a new div with the class pet and with the content type of our chick emoji. So at first, I create a new div. Then let's attach the class pet to this div. And now let's change the content type to chick emoji. We can manually pass the emoji of our chick, but actually we have many other pets with other emojis. So it means that we need to get the emoji from the constant pets. I know that our object has the key emoji, and here I know that our cell data is equal to this object. So let's create a new variable emoji that gets the emoji from this variable. If I know that we definitely have this key, I can access it by writing celldata.emoji. There is also another way how I can access this emoji. I can put square brackets and then I can pass the name of our key. Typically we don't pass the hard-coded strings, we pass the variables. But if I know the exact name of our key, it is easier to access it by putting dot and then the name of the key. And now we can pass this variable into our text content. At this point, we have created the same div with our JavaScript, but we also need to put it inside of the cell div. So for that, let's look to our cells code. The first line is the same. We create a new div. So then we attached the class of cell, and then we appended our cell div to our board. But the problem is that we append this div too early. The cell div at this point doesn't contain the data about our animal. And this is the reason why I need to call this line after we generate our pet divs. And now before we append our cell to the board, let's append our pet to the cell. If I save this file, you will see that nothing happens, and this is because we need to call our function spawnPet. So in the end of our file, we have the section GameStart, and now before the render, let's call our spawnNewPet function. And now you see that we have two chicks. So one is from the HTML file. I can go here and delete this manually written chick. And currently you see that we have only one chick. Currently we have another problem that the position of this chick is fixed to be on the first cell. No matter how much I refresh this page, it is always on the same cell. But we want to generate this chick randomly on any cell from the first to the last one. Inside of our spawnNewPet function, we have this line that appends our pet on the first cell on the board. Instead of passing 0, we need to pass the index. But at this point, we don't have the variable index, so let's create a new variable. If this variable is equal to 0, it works absolutely the same, but actually we want to generate this index in the range from 0 to 15, because we have 16 cells and the ID of the last cell is 15. Or to be even more correct, the last index is not 50, this is the board.length. So it means that if I change our board size, here where I create our board, I can pass another value, for example 20, And now you see that we have 20 cells on our page, so it means that the last value of this index should be 19. So let's undo these changes. Now let's create a new function that will generate a random index. For that, I will create a new section helpers. This section will contain functions that we are using inside of our core action functions. So let's create a new function, generate pet index. And here we need to create a new variable index that will have a random number. I have a function math.random that generates a random number between 0 to 1, and then I wrap it inside of the math.floor. This function rounds the number to the nearest integer downside. I don't want to have values like 0 point something, I want to have integers like 0, 1, 2 and so on. And now here I can multiply the math random by our board size. And now we can easily calculate what this function will return if we replace the math random with 0 and then with 1. If we replace it with 0, the board length is 16 and 0 multiplied by 16 is 0. So the lowest number that this function will generate will be 0. And now let's replace it with 1, but actually math.random can't generate the 1, it generates the closest number to it. This is actually something like 0.999. And now if we multiply it by our board length, which is 16, we will get the 15.999. And then if we round it down, we will get the 15. And this is actually the range that we want. So it means that our formula works correctly, and now we can return this index. So now we know that this function generates the expected boundaries, and now we can call it inside of our spawn new pet. And if you save this file, you will see a chick on a random cell. So I can refresh this page several times, and you will see that our chick is generated on a random cell. In this episode, we wrote a function for generating our pets, but this pet is still not clickable, and we also can't buy our pet by using our shop. In the next video, we will implement the buy button from our shop, and we will make our animals clickable.